Hey guys, I thought I would talk you through how I create my flywheel and workflows. Um, it's really basic, kind of common sense stuff, but it's slowly developed. It takes me a while to get to common sense. So I'm starting a painting company, and if you've read the E Myth Revisited, then you'll know what I'm talking about when I talk about I'm e-mything the company. So creating a franchisable company is the idea. And one of the concepts in the e-myth is to receive phone calls while you're in the middle of making a YouTube video. um, in the e-myth, they talk about in order to create a franchisable company, conceptually start at the top and build the company down. So what will the structure of the company look like in terms of, presidents, vice presidents, sales staff, technicians, that kind of thing. So create the structure of what you want the mature company to look like, and then you go to the bottom of that structure to the technician or whatever is at the very bottom of the structure, and start working your way out of a job at that level. So starting a paint company, then we're talking about the person at the bottom, not necessarily in terms of importance, but just in terms of practical application of the company's services. Someone who's actually installing paint on the wall. So as I think through developing that company and e-mything it, I create a structure which for me is going to be very simplistic. It's going to be basically an office manager / salesperson, marketing, so kind of the organizational side of the company, and then there will be one or more crews that are duplicates of each other essentially, and so you'll have kind of a supervisor, on-site supervisor who's will actually be doing painting, but it will also be doing some of the organizational side on the site, and then one or two people that are painters that are painting. So I created the structure. Now I'm starting at the bottom, and which will be the painter, not the supervisor, but the painter, and creating a job description and a set of processes for that particular person on site. As I do that, I'm starting to build a flywheel and a workflow for that level as a part of the job description. And so I create a flywheel and a workflow. And here's how it goes. So I've done a ton of painting in the past over the years, but haven't been looking at it in terms of creating a company. I've just done the actual painting in the course of my being a remodeling contractor and being in that trade for about 30 years. So now I'm starting to think through what does it actually take to successfully from start to finish of a job. What are the steps that need to be taken on painting an interior room or painting in the interior? So that's the workflow, the start to finish of the job. But then a job's going to take several days, and so in this particular case, you have a daily flywheel. You have the workflow, which is the start to finish of the job, getting the job prepped and getting the paint installed and getting out of there. But then what do you do on a daily basis to make that happen? So typically when I'm making a workflow and a flywheel system that integrates together, I just start brainstorming or actually start doing the thing that I'm creating the system for. And as I'm doing it, I'm noting every single thing that I do. So when I'm on the job site, I'm doing a paint job right now. I'm getting out my paint brushes. I'm cleaning paint brushes. I'm setting up my dust control and ventilation and air scrubber system, putting down drop claws, all those kinds of things. And as I'm doing them, I'm writing them down or typing them into my laptop, or dictating to Siri. Actually, is what I'm doing because I'm listening to Audible books along the way. So I'm just saying, "Hey Siri, add a note or take a note," and then I'll just add whatever's on my mind as I'm doing the actual thing, setting up scaffolding, ladders, whatever it is. And so I end up with just a jumbled pile. And I'm trying to be efficient, but the point is to become as efficient as I can be, and then to be able to reproduce the steps that I've as I've accumulated efficiencies, I want those to be embedded in the workflow and flywheel. So at the end of the day or at the end of the job, I have just a group of things, and I'm also brainstorming stuff I know I'm going to have to do, and I'm just sticking them into a workflowy list. No particular order. I just want to collect everything I possibly can that goes in there. Then I start to think through, what's the workflow? What in a painting job, what's the first thing you should do? Should you start just putting paint on the wall? No. So I have put first coat of paint on the walls, for example. Well, that needs to go after protect the floors. So I move protect the floors up above that. That needs to go, it needs to go after set up ventilation system. It needs to go before get the final check, clean up. I start sorting through, am I going to paint the trim or the ceiling or the walls first? So I think through what's the most efficient way to do that in general on a job. And so I order those, and I carefully do it. And then as I'm actually in practice doing what I think is the best way to do it, if I realize, you know what, I really should have painted the trim before the ceilings, or I really should have painted the ceilings and then the walls and then the trim, and I experiment with that until I figure out what's the exact best, most efficient way where I'm not having to backtrack or do touch up, and I'm ordering it all in workflowy, and then I print it out for the day, and I put that on my little table I have on the job site. And then as I'm going through it, anything that I think of, I will insert, a note, or I'll do an arrow pointing to what I think is a more efficient way of doing things. And then at the end of the day, I'll go into workflowy and adjust it and print it out again. And I printed out the reason in particular because paint, you're wet from cleaning your hands, or you have paint, and I don't want to be typing on my computer typically when I'm painting. But for a lot of things you're creating flywheels and workflows, you could just be manually entering it and adjusting it directly on your computer if that's an efficient way of doing it. So as I go through the job, I'm accumulating the workflow, but then I also have a flywheel, which this isn't going to be the case in everything. But for a painting project, it's going to be a daily flywheel. So I want to show you the visual of what I have in my mind. So when I think of flywheel and workflow, I think of a gear with a crank on it, with a handle on it. And I can grab that handle and I can crank it. And for the painting job, it's going to be at the level of each day. What am I going to do? And then I've got a workflow. And that also has some cogs on it. And as I crank this flywheel once a day, it moves the workflow from start to finish. So that's the concept in my mind when I'm thinking through a situation. I'm kind of picturing that. What do I want to do on a regular basis? It may be daily, it might be weekly, or it might be 3 times a week, or whatever is appropriate to the situation. And then that's going to drive the process. And what I'm really cranking on is this. That's what I'm focused on. And then this kind of is automated. As long as I have the workflow and flywheel integrated well, this is going to be done efficiently. And so as I find efficient ways of doing a paint job, an interior paint job, and I'm ordering that more and more efficiently, and then I have my flywheel that I'm ordering more and more efficiently and getting more and more compact and condensed. I'm deleting mistakes. Once I realize, oh shoot, I really should have painted the ceiling before I painted the trim. That was stupid. Well, I'll never do that again because I'll put ceiling above. the trim for the next time. So the next time I won't be making up in my head what I'm going to do. I'm going to be looking at my workflow, which is going to be driven by my flywheel. So I'll show you what this actually looks like. So my daily flywheel, I've just been working on this company for about a month. This is the first job I've actually done. So this is going to be something that is hopefully each job will get a little bit better until I found what I think is the maximum efficiency and I can't figure out anything to improve it, and then that will be a mature flywheel. So 2 days ago I got to the job. I hadn't pulled this out yet. I hadn't pulled out my flywheel, which I'd printed out. It was still in my briefcase sitting on the floor. And what I found myself doing was kind of standing around like, what do I need to do? I guess I'll go and get the paint. And, for me, I'm not very internally organized, so I don't house these lists in my head. It's all external. So I'm just kind of wandering around doing some things I know need to be done. But it's super inefficient. I'm like, oh, wait a second. What am I doing? I get out my piece of paper I'd printed out that morning, set it on, and then all I had to do then, because this is fairly efficient as far as it goes, I look at the top. Okay, I cease to ask myself, what should I do? I just look at my flywheel for the day, set up cleaning station, go and do that. That has its own, actually I'm going to create a list of what that exactly looks like. Will be one of the next things, I'll go in. Oops. What? Sorry. So I will go in. That's something else I can do to improve this, is create an exact list of what goes to the cleaning station, which is outside. It's a garden hose, it's brushes, it's buckets filled with water, that kind of thing. Once I get that done, check, cross that off. Make sure dust control measures are intact. Just make sure everything is still, all the plastic is still up, and then set up my air scrubber system and get that piped to the outside to create negative pressure to the workspace. So that's make sure dust control measures are intact. Turn on lights and fans, and then decide. And here's where I suit up. Actually, this is kind of part of the workflow. The suit up. So I identify where I am in my workflow. So here I'm going to jump down to the project workflow down here. This will get crossed off. Let me expand all. So in theory, it's partially efficient. It's probably at 90% efficiency. It's going to get better as I do more and more jobs. I just start at the top. This is when I get to the job. The very first thing, I'll do my job setup workflow. So this is what it takes to actually set up a job with all my tools and materials. So I'll do that first. So I'll actually move that under project workflow. So that's the very first thing I do. Then I start to prep the surfaces. So what's at the top, put my drop cloths down, seal up the workspace from the rest of the house with my zip wall system, turn off the HVAC system if needed, turn on. So I'm working my way down. And then once I've got my surface protection in place, that's done. I can cross that off. And once I've got my job set up, so now I'm just working. Once I get to this stage of my day, I just look to see what's at the top. Oh, there's my cleaning station. I've already done it. Okay, I'm going to have to reorder this. So that actually goes up underneath here. There we go. I've already done the work. Just haven't organized it. So what's at if I get there in the morning, I set up my cleaning station. I make sure dust control measures are intact. I turn on the lights. Then I do the work of the day. So I look to my workflow to see what's the work of the day. Okay, if I'm at this stage, I'm going to prep the walls. So this is the exact process. So I just start at the top of this and start completing it. And if at the end of the day I've prepped all the walls, then I close down. So if that's all, if it's 4:30 and it's time to clean up, then I jump back to my flywheel, do the rest of the flywheel for the day, and then I'm done. I get back the next morning. I set up my cleaning station, make sure my dust controls, this is the flywheel, lights and fans are on, then I do the work of the day, which is the workflow, and I jump down to that. Okay, what's at the very top of the list? Set up spray booth. So I do that. Then I go down to the next thing. So you can see this project workflow, I'm moving it towards the end when I get my final check. But it's driven by the flywheel, the daily flywheel. And you might think it might be overdone for some people who are naturally very efficient, or someone who's a craftsman who's done it for decades and they just know their own processes internally. But I'm trying to create processes, in this case, for a company so that someone who maybe has, painted for a summer can be hired and be very, very efficient, because I will print these out, laminate them, and put them on the job site and explain, here's what you do at the beginning of the day. You come in here and here's a whiteboard marker that you can cross it off as you go down. And they'll have a very efficient daily flywheel, and then they'll be working like I want them to work. So I don't want to get 4 painters who come in all with their own internal way of doing things, and then they start to get in each other's way, and there's not a systematic way of doing it. So I create what I think is the optimal flywheel, the optimal workflow to get the job done, and then I start to train. Now, someone who's been painting for 10, 20 years may come to me to be hired as a supervisor for painters and say, hey, I'll work for you for $20, $25 an hour, and I'll explain my flywheels and workflows. And they may say, hey, let me show you even a better way, a more efficient way to lay out your day or lay out the workflow on a job. I've learned this over the years, and then I can decide whether to incorporate it into my workflow or flywheel. But then if they add in something that really does create some efficiency, that then gets incorporated into the workflow or flywheel and immediately improves the system for the next person, because the next person may be somebody that just is off the street and I'm training how to even paint, but he's doing it in a way that I think is the most efficient, and also incorporating the best practices from books, video tutorials that I might watch, seasoned painters, but incorporating all the best practices and efficiencies for the next time you go. So the very next day, like I just, right in front of you, moved this setup cleaning station, which I do every day. And yesterday, I literally was kind of like looking around my tools and collecting things kind of haphazardly and getting them out there. And then 2 hours later, realizing I'd forgotten something, so I had to go back in. By creating this flywheel, printing it and laminating it once it gets to a certain amount of efficiency, I will stop looking around and forgetting things. I'll get exactly what I need out there at exactly the right time and exactly the right part of the process. So this principle of identifying what's the cycle of action I'm going to take to drive the workflow forward. I have a ton of these in my life that I've created over the years. So I'll give you one more example. I've got a remodel template that is it's the workflow for an interior remodel. So it's similar to what I just showed you with painting, except it's the project manager's work. It's not the actual, in this case, this is for an actual painter that I'm showing you right now. But I've got a remodel template that it doesn't look anything like this because it's a very different task, but it's all the tasks that a project manager has to do from start to finish. And there's like 1,500 nodes. I go in, delete any trades that don't apply. So if there's no masonry, I just delete the project management tasks associated with masonry and just delete that node. And when I'm done deleting everything that doesn't apply, I'm left with a list that looks kind of like this for the painter, but it's a list of things that a project manager has to do. So that's the workflow, start to finish on the job. But there's a project management flywheel that I've created that's similar in philosophy to what you're looking at here with a daily flywheel for painting, except this is actual physical activity. A project manager, for the most part, is mental, like orienting information appropriately. So it's a process of taking all of the input about a job, kind of GTD style, taking everything in from the funnel and then putting everything where it goes and then processing it a certain way. And so I try and do that about once a week on each job, and that actually drives the job forward. The workflow gets moved forward as I do that. I'll be creating, once I've worked myself out of a job and I've created this system for how I want to paint, and then created a job description and then hired for that job description, then I'll have a painter who's actually doing what I'm doing right now, and then I'll move up to supervisor and I'll start building a daily flywheel and a workflow for the supervisor, which I think will have some overlap, but it's also going to be interacting with the customer a certain way each day, tracking data like timesheets and that kind of thing that they'll be tracking, and whatever other stuff that the supervisor will be doing. So he'll be managing this daily flywheel and workflow for his painting crew, but he'll also have his own daily flywheel and workflow, and probably weekly flywheel for the supervisor of things he needs to do in terms of processing timesheets to send to the office manager. And then the office manager will have their own daily and weekly flywheels and workflows to move what they do forward. So that's kind of how I think of situations in my life that are repetitive and kind of complex to the point that I won't just automatically remember. Like, I don't need this for how to make an egg sandwich. It's all in my head. I know how to do it. But I do need it because I will forget and get things out of order when it comes to something that's larger and more complicated, and something I'm going to duplicate over months and years. And hopefully this painting daily flywheel and workflow will get better and better over the years and be repetitively used hundreds of times on each job. So anyway, that's kind of the concept. That's a practical example of a workflow and a flywheel, and hopefully that'll be helpful to you guys. I know lots of people have asked me what I even mean by a flywheel and a workflow. I've got a ton of philosophy in addition to all this. This is just one example. I spent my last 12-week year just focused on the philosophy and methodology of my flywheel and workflow systems. So I've got way more than you guys are going to be interested in watching. So hopefully that's helpful.